Good morning, everybody. The title of my paper on the program says Money Proper and Money Substitutes in Mises's Thought. It's actually a little more specific than that, my paper. It's more specifically a critique of Professor Selgin's paper, his paper that is titled 100% Reserve Money, the Small Chain Challenge, published in the Quarterly Journal of Austrian Economics. And so it's more specifically a critique of his, and I do go into some more general issues with Mises's, distinction between money and money substitutes. So I will first recreate his argument that he has in that paper of his, and then I will put forth my argument. So his paper is 100% Reserve Money, the Small Chain Challenge, and it is more largely based on his work in his book, which is titled Good Money. And in that book, he shows this historical instance of privately issued coins or privately issued small change. And what it was there was this shortage of small change, royal small change in England in the 18th century. And these private producers, or private actually copper mine owners, they started to mint their own coins and mint them and put their own, stamps on them and pay them out as wages, because there was this shortage of small change to pay as wages to these workers. So they started to produce their own coins with their own copper and paying them out as wages. So what he is arguing in the paper is that, so this was privately produced money and it worked very well. They went into circulation. It filled this need of small change in the country. But it was also, in the paper, he says that this was an instance of fiduciary media, meaning that they were unbacked coins, and that this was a case of privately produced fiduciary media, and that if it had not been issued on a fiduciary basis, that it would not have been profitable. It could not have arisen unless it was fiduciary. Okay, so there's a few technical aspects of the issue which I will go over. The first one is that these coins, they were privately produced, they were produced by copper mine owners, but they were coming into circulation as wages. So there was no prior deposit contract. So when we usually talk about fractional reserves and fiduciary media, we're talking about claims issued on the basis of a prior contract, usually at a bank. So this is not connected to that. This is completely separate. This is coins which are coming into circulation. So somebody works for you, they work for you, and as wages, you pay them these new coins that you have produced yourself. So the exchange is one of work for wages. There's no deposit. There's none of that. Okay. The second one is that we take it that it's a completely voluntary arrangement. He goes into his book, it's completely private, it's a completely voluntary arrangement. Nobody was forced to take these coins. There was nobody supporting the circulation of these coins, yet they did come into circulation. Okay, it was completely voluntary. And the important aspect is that these coins also bore redemption pledges. So a redemption pledge saying that if anybody holding this coin came back to the producer, right, that the producer would pay equivalent amount of royal pennies to the person. So it was this thing which says redeemable on demand on the coin. So in a sense, it made it into a claim. If you held this coin, it was sort of like holding a claim to money, because you could go back then to the producer and it said he would pay you back an equivalent amount of royal copper pennies. So what Professor Selgin is arguing is that, what he is arguing is that suppose somebody is producing 1 penny and the cost of producing the penny, so the mining and the minting, the production cost is half a penny, okay, and this penny costs half a penny to produce, right? But it also bears this redemption pledge saying that it will pay you back money on demand, right? So it's a claim. So now, if you require these producers to keep 100% reserves in equivalent money to, meet redemption demand, that means you are requiring them to keep an extra penny on reserve, right, to pay back in case people come to redeem these coins. So in effect, you're creating this system where the cost of producing 1 penny is actually greater than 1 penny. It becomes 1.5. So his argument is that this is too high. This cost is too high for any sort of, in an economy, and especially in this case. So the producers of those coins it would not be profitable for them to produce those coins if they kept 100% reserves. So they would have to keep less than 100% reserves, right? And then it would be profitable. But that also means in his system that these coins were then fiduciary media, or they were not fully backed. So if everybody went back to redeem them, the people would not have 100% reserves. So that is his argument. So this is where my argument comes in. I use Mises's typology of money, which is what Professor Sullivan is using as well, fiduciary media and fully backed substitutes of money, to show that one could also argue in a different way. So I'm going to put this. So this is Mises's typology of money, and taken from the theory of money and credit. And if you look at it, so there's money in the narrower sense, and then there's money substitutes, right? Money substitutes, which are claims to money. And just straight looking at this, it just follows logically that only money substitutes can possibly be either fiduciary media or money certificates. Money certificates are fully backed money substitutes, right? Only money substitutes can be fiduciary media, not money itself. It doesn't make sense to say that money on its own is not fully backed. Fully backed by what? It's not a claim to anything. It's valued for itself. It's money on its own. Only something that is a substitute for money, which is a claim for money, can then be fiduciary media. So what I argue in the paper is that there's an equally good interpretation to be made of these coins as just money, as new money that was valued for itself, that came into circulation. It was a new private money. And yes, it did bear these redemption pledges saying that, that we will pay you money in return for these coins, but I interpret that as just like a regular buyback guarantee that you have on many goods. So an analogy to my argument would be any good that you would buy in the store, right, that you would value anyway, you would exchange money for that good. But suppose that good now bears a redemption guarantee saying that, we will pay you money on demand for that, right? But that does not make that good now, it does not make it into a fiduciary media. It's just a buyback guarantee. That good on its own is valued for itself. So what I argue is that those coins, they had a certain metallic content, which was actually pretty high, and that they were actually primarily first valued for the copper content. And yes, that, having the redemption pledge on there did add to its value, but that was not the only thing that people valued it for. So my paper I use evidence from Professor Sullivan's book, Good Money itself, which, there are many places, it's a very detailed historical work, and there's many places which suggest that these coins were just being valued for their copper content. So I have a quote here, this is from his book, and he's talking about these workers who refused to take these coins from their master because they were too lightweight. They did not have enough copper in them, and the denomination that the master put on them was too high for them. So I'm reading this. It says, it's talking of this master who produced these coins. It says, instead, he originally assigned his coins, which bore no express denomination, a value of 1 penny, despite the fact that they only weighed half as much as Druid pennies. So Druid pennies are a competing private penny. Wilkinson is the master we're talking about. Wilkinson's workers and tradesmen, where his works were located, refused to accept the great ironmaster's tokens at the rate he assigned to them, forcing him to cry them down, as it were, to half their originally intended value. Considered as half pennies, the Wileys were as good as their Druid counterparts, and only at this rating did they first gain widespread acceptance. So this is, it's telling you that, the copper content of those pennies, it was part of the valuation of those coins. It was an important part of that valuation. And another thing which points to it is the amount of metallic content in these coins. When you talk of token coins, a token coin is usually meant to be something whose face value or redemption value is very much higher than its metallic value. It's the metallic value, or, if you were to just sell it as metal, it should be worth much less than what you could redeem it for if you were to redeem it for. But here, in this case, the pennies, there was, I think it was 9 pence to a shilling was the metallic value. So a shilling has 12 pennies, and the metallic value was 9 pence of that. That's 75%. That's it's much higher. It's again telling you that people actually did value these for their copper content. And so it's not as clear cut as Professor Seljan is claiming. And this is where the important distinction from Mises comes in, where he talks about claims and money substitutes. So the question is, does any good which, circulates as money, if it bears a claim which says, I will pay you back money on demand, does that make it a money substitute? Because that would make a lot of things money substitutes, and it would make a lot of things fiduciary media. So you can imagine goods which we would buy them for themselves, we would value them for themselves, but they also bear these guarantees saying, I will pay you money back in return for them. Now, let's suppose, you have this little, I use this example, it's a miniature car model, and, people value them for themselves, but they also bear these guarantees saying that I will pay you back money on demand. Now, let's say there's hyperinflation in our economy, and these little things start circulating as media of exchange. Now, does that mean those things are fiduciary media? Because the producers of those goods did not back it up 100%, keep 100% reserves, or keep all the money that you paid for them under lock and key just in case you wanted to buy them or sell them back and redeem that money, so there's a problem there. And so this is where I use Mises, and Mises even says this when he's defining money substitutes. He says, money substitutes are claims to money payable on demand, but he says claims are not goods. They are means of obtaining disposal over goods. This determines their whole nature and economic significance. They themselves are not valued directly, but indirectly. Their value is derived from that of the economic goods to which they refer. So it's clear, even in Mises, that a money substitute can only be something which is valued only as a claim, not something which is valued for itself and as a claim. In that case, he even says somewhere, in that case, it would just be money. And that is basically what I am arguing, is that those coins, which were, it's pretty clear that they were valued for their metallic content, that they were just money, and they bore these redemption guarantees, but that doesn't mean that the producers now have to keep, all the money on reserve just in case people came back. It's just a regular business decision. It boils down to a business decision. It's one which a lot of businessmen, need to make. It has nothing to do, it's not relevant at all to this question of 100% reserves, fraction reserves. None of that even applies here. It's just a regular business decision. So, I would just like to end by saying that because one of the arguments made in favor of fractional reserves is that it's a business decision for a bank, right? It's just it's just a business decision. And I'm not arguing that that's right or that's wrong. I'm not arguing about that. But in this case, this is something which was just it was actually a business decision. It's actually a business decision. If you produce a good, you sell it on the market, you put a guarantee saying I'll buy it back, right? I'll pay you your money back in return for it. Then the amount of inventory you must keep on reserve to meet that demand is a business decision. It's a legitimate business decision. But that does not mean that, it's a case of fractional reserves working well. It doesn't apply here. It's just a separate business decision. Yeah, thank you.